Hello, HolyWireMod here. Welcome to the 8th tutorial in the GLua Pro series where we're going to be taking a look at functions, local variables, and custom errors. So let's start by printing to our left-hand side, server console as usual. And we're going to be taking the block example and combining it with local variables. So as you recall, a global variable is default nil. However, in this case, we're going to be setting it to 10. To make it a local variable, simply put local in front of it. And when you call a local variable or define a local variable inside of a block of code, you cannot actually see that variable outside of the block of code. So right here, it's going to return nil. However, if I print right here, it's going to return 10. You can also see the variable inside of a block of code, or a sub-block of code in this case. So we're going to have a for loop from the last tutorial, and we're going to print x plus I. So there you go. So we can see x inside of this sub-block of code, which is defined. However, we can't see it outside. Now, contrary to that, we have the global variable, which I'm going to just put as soup, and then we'll try to print out global outside of the block of code in which it's defined, and that works. So that's the difference between a global and a local variable. We'll be going into that a little bit more later in the tutorial, but first let's cover the basics of functions. So function, we have a custom function name and we have parentheses which will contain arguments. In this case we won't, just to keep it simple. Then we'll have a block of code in which we're going to execute something. So we'll say soup. And if I do that and control save, it's not going to do anything because we actually have to call the function. To do that, simply put the name of the function with the parentheses which will contain the arguments, and there we go. Call it multiple times, you get multiple soup. And that's pretty awesome if you think about it. So let's say we want a function with arguments. So we'll have exponent, then we'll have arg1, and we'll have arg2. And here we're going to be returning a value. So return, as you recall from last video, simply canceled out a loop and didn't execute any of the code further beyond that execution. Well, in this case, we can actually grab values from a function with it as well. So we're going to have arg1 to the second power of arg2. They're going to be both assumed to be of type number in this case. So we're going to have exponent to call it, and then we're going to have argument 1 equals 2, argument 2 equals 2 as well. So this 2 goes here, this 2 goes here, and then we have 2 to the second power. It's going to return 4. Likewise, we can have 8, we can have 256. You see that it works. If we include a third argument, that's fine. It's not actually going to consider this third argument, and we'll run it as normal. If we put too few of argument, the second argument is going to be assumed to be nil, and we're going to get an error. So speaking of errors, let's make a custom error. So we have if, and we'll say arg2 is equal to nil. Then we're going to spit out an error, and it says that arg2 has not been specified. So when we print this out, now you can see the error message is different. It says arg2 has not been specified. Or if you'd like to, as an alternative, you can just return arg1, or you can return really whatever you want, and that's just fine too. And likewise, just to emphasize this, that's what's going on. So you should be good there. Now let's move on to a case where we're going to be returning multiple values. So we'll have explode and we'll have space. And then we'll say string, which is going to be the string argument. And we're going to have some local variables in here, just to recap on local variables. So you get it into your head. From the string library, we're going to have the explode function, if you recall from prior tutorial. And then we're going to have a count of the table. So if you recall, this is how we count the number of entries in a table by key value. And then we're going to return table, comma, and count. So now we're returning 2 values instead of 1. So we can accept both of those values. If you recall as well, as we went to in the prior tutorial too, as you can see there's a lot of recap in this tutorial. We have the 2 values which are going to be captured, separated by a comma. And our argument here is going to be soup is good. And then lastly, we're going to be printing the table. So we're going to have table, then we're going to print, and I'm going to print count here. So there we go. We have the table, which is soup is good, and we have the number of entries, which is count, and 3 in this case. All right, so what about if we have an unknown number of inputs to this, or unknown number of arguments? So let's do something called getSum. Now the way you represent an unknown or variable number of arguments is you put 3 dots just like that. And then we're going to put local sum, and we're going to initialize this local variable to 0. And then we're going to be printing out the type of sum. So we'll show you this, and I'm just going to call it right now, and I'll put print getSum, and we'll put some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're going to have 10 arguments here, and as you can see, the type right here is considered a table. So what's nice about that is that we can actually use a for kv in pairs loop, and instead of using parentheses here and putting some name of a table, the difference here is we're going to be putting in the arguments. So this, remember, counts as type table, so this is very valid to do this. Then you go do end just as such, and here we're going to be saying sum is equal to sum plus the value in which we inserted. So the values in this case would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And then we're going to get the sum of all that once we return sum. So there we go. We have 55 is the sum of all these, and that's very good. So let's then make a function local. So how would you make a function a local variable? So you'd have local, of course, and then we're going to have the name of the function. So we'll call this function negate it, and we'll set it to equals to function, and the arguments would be defined as such like here. So we're going to have bool. So this is a very simple example for you, and we're going to be returning the negation of bool. Okay, end. So there we go, and let's print negate it, and we're going to be inputting true as our argument, and there we go. Now we have false. All right, so and likewise, you cannot call negate it outside of this file because negate it was defined in this block of code, which, if you recall from last tutorial, is this file. All right, so let's take an example of defining a function inside of a table or a library in this case, because you recall they're the same thing. So we're going to have the key value func, and we're going to have that assigned to some function x, y, and z as the arguments. And here we're going to return x plus y plus z, so something really simple, and then we're going to end it. And then we're going to have a constant and equal to 5. All right, so that's going to be our table known as library. And then we're going to print the library. And then we're going to have func. And the inputs for our arguments is going to be 1, 2, and 3. So 1 plus 2 plus 3, which will give us 6 as such. And just to show you there's no trickery here, there we go. We have 11, we have 15, and so on. So that's how a library works with functions. And that should be very educational for you, hopefully. Lastly, I'd like to do something called an closure. So a closure is, let's say we have an enclosed function, and we're going to have a local I equal to 0, and we're going to return a function. So when we return a function, it's known in Lua as a tail call. So we're going to have I is equal to I plus 1, and then we're going to return I. All right, so yes, you can actually return a function inside of a function. So let's get the value of I, and I'm going to show you something nice about this. Here we go. So we have get I, and let's print get I. So when we do that and we print get I, or actually I need to put parentheses here, is it has 1. So it's returning value 1. Now what's nice with this tail call here is it remembers the value of I. So if I go here and do it a second time, now I is equal to 2. And likewise, and I'm pressing Control D to multiply the lines, by the way, if I go 6 times, it goes up to 6. So that's a very interesting feature of Lua within a tail call. It will remember stored local variables, which are defined in the same block of code, which the return is also called. So that should cover most everything about functions. There's a little bit more I didn't cover, however, we'll get into that in a later video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave so in the comments section below. As always, if you like the material, feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and bell. And thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next tutorial. Don't forget to check out Hexane Networks for affordable and high-performance server hosting. That's Hexane Networks, whose link is in the description below.